Welcome to this next edition of CTQ Smart Levers. And today we want to talk about something which we were introduced to in the form of a book, but now we've just fallen in love with that philosophy. And this is something on which we've done some workshops for our clients as well. So I'm really interested to know what Ramanand has to say. So, Raman, what is working backwards all about?
So, Working Backwards, the title of a book about Amazon by two former Amazon employees. And they talk in detail about how Amazon uses this process to create something new. The idea here is to make a mental leap forward in time and put yourselves in, say, 6 months, a year ahead, maybe even further than that. And imagine a scenario that you want to present to the world, to your customers. So let's say I choose to think we want to introduce a new offering, maybe a new compound around information and knowledge. And we have a certain audience in mind, an audience like, say, managers, or it could be young freshers in an organization. It's very hard for us to know what we should offer to them and also to tell our teammates what we have in mind. So, what we could do is just jump forward in time and imagine this world that we want to create, and then more importantly also capture it in the form of an artifact. In the case of Amazon, that artifact is called a press release, and with some additional information it's called PRFAQs. And the idea is, if we were to go ahead in time and publish this press release introducing this new offering, what would we write in it and why would the customer really find it of resonance? Once you have created that, then you come back in time and you say, what do we need to do from today till moment in time to make this come alive and get all your team to put its weight behind it.
The book does cover about a lot of other principles that Amazon tries to adhere to. Working backwards is one of the principles that they have, but I think it makes sense to go deeper into this specific one. So, where have we used working backwards ourselves, and how have we helped our customers adopt this philosophy?
Yeah. So, in fact, Amazon looks at this as a way to bring some of their principles to life. So, some of their principles are about long term thinking and being customer focused. So, this evolved as a way, what they call a mechanism to actually create that to life. So, if you share the same view about your customers and long term thinking, then this is something you can use. So, in our case, we have often got into situations where people want us to help their teams think beyond today. And that's a very difficult exercise for most people to do. What they do is forecasting. They take their current situation and they extrapolate to the future. And it is therefore limited by whatever we know today. Instead, working backwards comes under you can think of it as backcasting, or looking, going to the future and then looking back. And so take an example like the world has been working remotely. Everybody now agrees that some form of in-person interaction is necessary. But does that mean we go back to what the world was before 2020, where you have buildings and you had people reporting from 9 to 5 every day? Or is it going to be different? So in one such example, a group of managers, leads came together, and we helped them go through this process of trying to imagine that future. And one of the components we used was this working backwards approach, wherein we said, what if you just go ahead into the future? It's 2022, maybe March, and you are now sending out an email to all of your employees stating that what is going to happen next. When will you start coming back to work? What are the initiatives that we've launched to keep people safe, to help them make the best of hybrid work? What does this word hybrid work mean in our context? And really to make them go through that process of trying to write that piece of communication. That's an example of working backwards. And once they came up with that email, they were able to go back, get feedback from different corners of the organization, and then once that aligned on a certain set of initiatives, start putting that into action. It drew a lot more people into that conversation. It was not hostage to what we want and we like doing, and extrapolate that from today. And so the whole experience is a lot more free of these constraints that otherwise come when you're simply drawing a line from today to 6 months ahead.
Right. I know there will be a lot more nuance to it, but we have, spoken about destination postcard. We've spoken about pre-mortem. So, how would you sort of, make a distinction between those two tools and this approach of working backwards? Is it one?
Yeah.
Is it a part of the other?
Yeah.
Just
So
expand.
I look at them as belonging to the same family, and you can call that family the family of prospective hindsight tools. I believe this phrase was coined by the same person who came up with the idea of pre-mortems. So it seems like a contradiction at first. You're both looking ahead and you're looking backwards, prospective and hindsight. But we all know the power of hindsight. It suddenly says, we should have done this. This is the most obvious answer to our question. So we want to retain the power of hindsight, but we want to do it without some form of time travel and a time machine. So all we have is our mind and a group of people who can do it. So I would say destination postcards, whether it be another exercise of writing your obituary in the future, these are all ways, lenses to do prospective hindsight. And the great thing is that once you start getting some mastery on the mindset that is needed for one of these, you find it very easy to jump into a working backwards process, or writing a headline from the future, or creating that obituary for yourself. So it's the same class of techniques in our mind, and they're great for harnessing the imagination. And if you look at our one of our previous episodes is on brainstorming, you can bring them all together to really run a very tight way of imagining the future.
Right. All right. And any specific use cases that you can think of where, up levelers and or leaders will benefit from using this approach?
Right. So I think something like the working backwards philosophy is making its way through the mainstream. Some companies we know, some people we know, some leaders we know are experimenting with this. And it is a huge challenge. It's not at all easy. It requires imagination. It requires people to work together. It requires a lot of collecting signals about the future from various sources. And so that it needs a good curiosity diet, which we've spoken about earlier. It also needs some skills about creating that artifact. So it is a challenging exercise, especially at the beginning. So I say that I think a lot of the leaders who are looking at the next set of management techniques, next set of techniques to live in a world which is, if your situations where it is very uncertain, you have a lot of different possibilities about the future, and so you don't want to entirely rely on a forecasting method. So if you're in a charge of a team, if you're responsible for leading them into an unknown future, all those leaders will benefit from knowing these family of techniques. And a good place to start is to read the book Working Backwards.
All right. On that note, Ramanand, thanks for explaining about working backwards. I'm sure anyone who is watching these Smart Levers episodes cares about future relevance. So thanks, Ramanand.
Thanks, Harish.